Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast, featuring in-depth conversations with executives, leaders, influencers, and journalists in this dynamic, high-stakes industry. Hosted by Picken, founder of Northstar Group, the boutique executive search firm for the aerospace industry. You'll learn how top aerospace executives are developing their people, competing for talent, overcoming challenges, and adjusting to industry trends to drive growth and profits. And now, let's join your host, Picken.
Hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. Today I've got Don Dwyer on with me. Don is managing partner at Guardian Jet. Guardian Jet, for anybody who doesn't know, is one of the top aircraft brokerages in the business jet side of the industry. Don's been around the industry for a long time. I first met him several years ago when he was vice president of sales at Hawker Beechcraft. I'm thrilled to have you on today, Don. Thanks for being here.
Well, Craig, thanks so much for asking me on. I'm grateful, and it's always fun to talk about what's going on in our world.
So we're just talking offline. We're talking a little bit about the market, and so you guys have really made a dent the last 18, 20 years since your company was founded. And I know you're doing a lot of transactions, but what are you seeing in the business jet side of the industry with regards to the economy, with regards to the elections, transactions, et cetera?
So I think what we've seen is over the last couple of years, we had a fairly robust, I'll go back to the last 3 years, pretty robust numbers of transactions and actually a stabilization in the pricing of the best models in the used market. Some of the older kind of airplanes that are heading towards obsolescence, market obsolescence anyways, are still decreasing in value at an alarming rate. But there's been a stabilization, I think a compression at the bottom end of pricing over the last couple of years, which has been very healthy. The number of transactions in 2019 did decrease. So we track 120 some markets, the 55 what we consider A markets, which would be the ones that we do the most business in. The number of transactions was down a little bit more than 20% for the industry. We were kind of lucky. We kept growing through that, but I'd say we were masked a little bit by it because we've been adding salespeople. So, our transactions should go up. But yeah, so it was a good year. We didn't reach our goals. We had 100 transaction goal and we were a little bit short of that, but it still was our best year ever. But I do think that the increasing inventories, which we're seeing across the board, and a little bit slowing of rate of sale in the resale markets will cause a little softening in pricing this year. So we're looking towards that.
So the big news is, from the OEM side of the house, the top of the market, the 650, the Global 7500, the big cabin, the big metal stuff is really selling. The little metal, the smaller jets are a little bit stagnant. You think that, does the big cabin side of the house continue to grow while everything else stays stale, or do you, from an OEM perspective, or do you see everything? How do you see it all trending out?
Well, you certainly see the OEMs making the big bets on the large cabins. So, the new G700, the 7500 you mentioned, Falcon's got some products we hear in development, don't know a lot about it, but I think to compete in that size. So there's a lot of competition in the very, very high end. I also think the kind of the super mid-size is still very, very popular. That's been a very powerful size aircraft since its introduction, with the thought process that it operates for a mid-size budget, but you get a little bit more cabin comfort and capability, has resonated in the marketplace. So we see both those segments as staying very strong. But both of them have attracted a lot of competition too. There's a lot of ways to spend, more than $40 million or more than $20 million in the super midsize.
Yeah,
so,
well, As one guy told me one time, he says, look, if you take a Challenger 350 or a super mid from Embraer, or a Gulfstream 280, he's like, they're all great airplanes. They're all terrific. What's differentiating these guys right now?
That's a really good question. So you've got in the 350, you've got the pricing leader and the market leader. You don't see that all the time. Where it's the least expensive option of the three. We're involved. Matter of fact, today I'm at a very large company that is looking at a multiple super mid-size purchase, and so we've asked all the manufacturers, and they're all a little bit different. They all have strengths, but it's hard to differentiate. So price is one way. There's now some performance leaders. The 280, when it jumped up its performance to the 3,600 mile range, was a differentiator. Now the Praetor goes another 300-400 miles past that. So, there's but now you got the Longitude entering that space. So, there's a lot of choice, and that's just a new. Now you take that same $20 million and you throw in a used, Falcon 2000 or so there's just a lot of choices out there right now. And we see the same thing in the kind of high end, Craig, as you and I know, for 20 years, the top of the market was $50 million bucks. Somewhere between $40 and $50 million to buy a 550, a 7X or a Global. And, now there's a lot of entrants in that mid 40s and above. There's, that's the fourth airplane in the Gulfstream lineup. That's the third airplane in the Bombardier lineup. So it's a crowded space, but it's where there's a lot of activity too.
Yeah, no, well, hey, look, as we all know, at the big cabin space, I remember, years ago being a Gulfstream, there was about a 20% net margin, 25% net margin on a green aircraft. So you're talking about $24 million aircraft, $5 to $6 million profit. And when you're making $5 to $6 million out the door per copy, life is pretty good. When you're trying to slug it out at the lower end and making 600,000 or 700,000, that's a tough living. Volume it's a hard way to go. So maybe that's the big push towards the top. I don't know, but
I also think though that there's. Yeah, it's overcrowded, and I think but I also think these are really smart guys running these companies. They're reacting to what their customer base wants, and they're all coming out with, whether they're clean sheet designs, they're all coming out with improvements. We see the 6500 at Bombardier being a really competitive airplane right now. The 5 and 600 at Gulfstream are extraordinary airplanes. A lot more to replace it. If you got a 450 and you're going to replace it with a 500, it's a pretty big delta right now. But, you're getting something for your money, though. You're getting newer technology. You're getting more capability, more size, more speed. So there's a lot of really interesting airplanes right now.
No doubt. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk more about your business. So you guys you've been really successful. I know you and your brother, and you brought on a really good team. What are people looking for when they're hiring y'all? It's more than being just a broker or transactional. What are they?
Well, for us, it's way more. Yeah, we built a consulting business on top of a brokerage. So, the easiest way to describe the company, Brian, is that we conduct transactions for the most sophisticated, smartest buyers in the world, the biggest companies and the smartest people, through providing great consulting, through providing great intelligence. So we use the consulting business in whether we're doing fleet planning for the biggest companies in the world, which we're privileged to do that on a regular basis, as well as the guy coming out of, that's flying 150 hours of fractional, and he's flying a little bit more and wants to know what he should do now. So the consulting business has led to our ability to retain customers for a long time. And And it's gone great. The idea of hiring a sales force that has products and services more than just, waiting for your next transaction. It's gone well. It's an expensive way to do business. So I don't know that Mike and I are the smartest guys in the room, but we think it's a good way to build something of value.
Yeah, no, I hear you. What's top of the mind in the customers' heads right now? I mean, a couple of years ago, it was a falling knife with depreciation. Today it's not so much the depreciation. But you take your average. You take your average. I'll just say a G500, G550 flyer. They're getting a 7,000-mile airplane, but their average leg is 2 hours. What's the biggest issues that they're looking at as far as?
That's a great question. So it's a little different for the two. We have two very distinct customer groups. One is the corporate flight department, and one is the high net worth individual. And on the high net worth side, I think there's this sort of there's still a great deal of creative wealth in the United States. So companies, corporate profits are good. Small business owners are doing well. So there's still a great economy going on in the U.S., but there's also this sort of feeling of people waiting for the other shoe to drop. So on the high net worth side here, I think you're seeing, what's it going to look like in 12 months, or is there a correction coming? Anybody ever remember a 15-year bull run? So I think there's a little bit of that going on. On the corporate side, there's definitely a movement to right sizing, to not necessarily buying the flagship from the OEM, but buying the right airplane for the mission. And that means sometimes turning part of the fleet into smaller aircraft. There's a lot of that. I just sat with a big Midwest flight department yesterday, and their thought was, we're flying 300-mile legs with 1.8 passengers. They could do it in CJs and not in the large cabin airplane they currently have. So there's a lot of talk about right sizing and then defensibility of the flight department because of that. And on the global scale, I'll tell you the one that is the most concerning or I think the one that's become a much bigger part of the conversation is the carbon footprint. So in Europe, I just got back from the Corporate Jet Investor Conference, and I spoke over there. And I in an interview I did, I said it went from being 2 years ago a part of the conversation, the carbon footprint, to the conversation now. So there's a lot of talk about it. I still haven't seen evidence of people making decisions based on it. So we still have we're still building 700-800 new jets a year. As an industry, we're still, doing over 2,500 transactions in the used side. So I just haven't seen it, become reality, but it's very much a part of the conversation.
What fixes that conversation? Is it sustainable fuel? Is it?
That's a really great question. So, because I don't have the answer, but because it was so much part of the conversation, I talked to a lot of people and I asked a lot of questions about what people understood or knew about sustainable fuels, what they knew about carbon offsets, where you would go get a carbon offset, how you would do it. And it was shocking to me, the lack of real knowledge. So I think as an industry, we've got to do a good job of educating what it is, because everybody knew the buzzwords, but nobody really knew, how much more was sustainable fuel than jet fuel. Where do you get it? Who supplies it? And the carbon footprint. Where do you plant a forest?
Right.
So it was. I think the sophisticated people know, but for most of us out there, it's. That's why I say it's not so much a reality yet as more a perception of it's coming.
Yeah, I got you. I hear you. What do you think about, so what's the movement from, owning your own airplane to fractional or, a lot of Part 135 consolidation, a lot of charter management companies now? eating each other up?
Well, so the frac companies seem to be doing really well, and they all seem to be sort of morphing into what the next generation will be. They're all they've all got. They're either we see some really interesting frac companies on the smaller side with some real discipline that are doing well. FlexJet, NetJets, these guys seem to be doing very well. They have, they're certainly vertically integrated with management companies or partners or so the large operator seems to be healthy today. Whether it's VistaJet, Flex, Net, they all seem to be attracting customers. We're also seeing the first, I think in the last few years, we saw the first, what I would call recognizable wave of people coming out of fractional and buying new airplanes. We did a lot of first-time buyers in the last few years, buying very sophisticated airplanes. Because if you think about this, Craig, my generation sort of got introduced to aviation through, maybe they bought a King Air and then a jet, then a bigger jet. And these people are entering aviation in good-sized airplanes operated by very professional crews and the highest levels of service. So, it's an interesting entry level into aviation. And so when they're coming into the wholly owned space, which they are now,
right,
more than I've seen in the past, it's hard to call them a first-time owner. They're a very savvy, sophisticated aviation user.
Yeah, no, that's it. Look, I think that, fractionals have done a really good job of either giving somebody a taste of it and they go off and buy their own, or, keeping a customer, and it's kind of the shared economy, right? It all depends on, just the needs. The fractionals can't be everything to everybody, and they know it. But on the flip side too, they provide a great service, and there's a lot of value there too. So
we're big fans in flight departments as supplemental lift. We're big fans, when you have a mission that 100 hours, but there's tons of good options, whether it's Kenny and Wheels Up or the FlexJet has an interesting program right now where they're selling days on airplanes as opposed to hours,
right,
in their large cabins. So, everybody's kind of morphing into some really interesting choices for the consumer.
Yeah. Hey, look, when I was in the fractional, it was, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit because we're not negotiating. Well, that lasted about 20 minutes because you got a very sophisticated buyer, and you're just not going to tell a very sophisticated buyer that there's no negotiation. They'll go figure it out a different way. So, I'm glad to see people are getting very creative. So, let's finish it up. I know you got a busy day. Where do you see the market? You got Bombardier. I'm hearing a little bit of rumblings about the financial health of Bombardier and what they got to do with the biz av side of the house. And you got Gulfstream coming out with the 700. Cessna is obviously rolling out the Latitude, the Longitude. Falcon's got some stuff coming on. Embraer as well. How do you see it all? Who becomes a really strong? Does Gulfstream get stronger while Bombardier gets weaker? Or what are you seeing out there?
Well, that people have been predicting that for a long time, and we're big fans of both companies. The only thing I'm sure of is everything we've heard so far about Bombardier and what's going to happen is probably wrong.
Yep, you're right.
It's kind of like an accident, it's amazing the opinions I've gotten from people who ask me what I think.
Yeah.
And then tell me what they know, and they're so diverse, they're canceling this line and that line. And so I've told our customers, listen, we probably got to see, we'd like to see, 90 days from now, where things shake out before we make some big decisions. And we think that's probably prudent. But we think there's going to be, I don't think you'll see a changing landscape. Having said that, I worked for a company, Craig, that went away. The most popular selling business, mid-sized business jet of all time went away and no one noticed.
Yep.
We were just building so many airplanes as an industry at that time. Hawker Beechcraft literally goes away and I don't think anybody sold an extra airplane because of it. Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, there's a lot of models out there. There's a lot of OEMs right there. I'm not sophisticated enough to call that there's a need for consolidation, but I do know that I do think the aircraft division is the gem of Bombardier.
Yep.
The business aircraft piece is the piece that they'd want to hold on to the most, and the one that probably is the most desirable out there. They
make a great jet. They make a great jet.
And
they make a fantastic airplane.
And they sell a boatload of them. So, yep. We're kind of cautiously optimistic and saying, hey, let's watch things settle down. But we also see in the corporate world, a lot of people stepping up to new airplanes this year. I think it's a very good time to be buying airplanes. We think, we're still at, even with a little bit of pricing stabilization, you're still at historically low prices for the most popular airplane on the used resale market.
Mm-hmm.
You're at $22 million. You get a lot of G550 right now. At $12 million, you get there's wherever you're looking at, whatever price range you're looking at, you're getting a lot of value in the used market. And because there is competition in the new airplanes, and our new buying, which is mostly driven by the corporate world, is very strong right now. So we're bullish on the year. But matter of fact, in spite of what I hear around the industry, the title of our sales meeting was Double Down. So.
Yep.
We think it's a good time to keep growing. So,
well, good stuff. You're sounds like you're optimistic for 2020 then.
Yeah, I love to think I'm like sometimes 50% the most confident guy in the room and 50% the most neurotic. But I think we're looking for a good year. And the more I'm out and I spend a lot of time out with customers. The more I'm out with the customers, they want to be doing things this year. They don't want to change their buying habits because of, or at least we haven't seen it yet. So
there you go. Well, good. Well, go sell something. Thanks for coming on today. You got to come back. You got to come back in a couple of months and tell us how progress is happening. How's that sound?
Oh, I'd love it. And I really appreciate the forum to talk about what we love. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.